when Lewis and Clark came to Oregon between 1804 and 1806, one of the people who came along with that expedition, but one who has been largely lost from the considerations of that expedition, is a man named York.
Because we don't know what York looked like, there are obviously no photographs, there are only minimal physical descriptions of York. Alison decided to create a representational image of a man, obviously an African-American man, but not with characteristics that would be so specific as to be identifiable as some person. And in fact, with this York sculpture, the back features predominantly in the metaphor of the sculpture, because she's used York's back as the canvas on which to place a map that was drawn by William Clark, where he designated a geographical feature as York's Dry Creek bed. And this map by William Clark has been scarified onto York's back. So he is very literally and metaphorically carrying the burden of the Corps of Discovery on his physical back.
So although York was a slave, his participation in the expedition was very unslave-like, in that he did essentially the same things and made the same kind of contributions that all other members of the expedition did. The main difference was that when they returned, all the other members of the expedition became celebrities and were well rewarded for their work. But once York was back within the confines of the traditions of American life in his generation, he became a slave again. So his story represents one of the most unique and one of the most interesting aspects of American life and history in that particular generation.
The entire project was conceived by Charles Neal, an African-American law student who came to Lewis and Clark and realized that there is no visage or representation of York's contribution to the Corps of Discovery on campus. In fact, I think he did some, questioning around amongst his fellow law students and realized that many people did not know who York was.
So one of the things that I study is African American public memory, because public memory is a huge field. You can study war, you can study politics, you can study virtually anything that has to do with the way that groups of people, desire to remember themselves and others within their society. So African American public memory is about how African Americans not only remember themselves, but how others tend to remember the African American community. It's interesting, a lot of the memorials will position York behind and in a submissive position to Clark and Lewis. And I think that that's a problematic issue. That's a problematic form of representation. So one of the things that I think Lewis and Clark as an institution, our college, is trying to do is trying to correct the record.
As you look at American history in the 19th century, it's the history of the expansion of the country across the continent. It's the history of the acquisition of tremendous new resources of land that the country acquired, sometimes because of successful wars, sometimes because of successful competition with the native populations. But at every point when new land was acquired, the central political and social and economic issue was whether slavery would be allowed in that new land. And York was really the first chapter in the kind of issues related to blacks that were going to be prominent and significant for the whole country in the 19th century.
One of the things in developing the criteria, the committee was very determined to find an artwork or an artist that could create an artwork that would show York as both slave and significant. Those were two equal and opposite parts of York's character that we wanted to highlight. The sculpture of York standing facing west is obviously the focal point of the memorial, but as an ancillary didactic component, there will be text fragments scattered around the site, which will include passages from the journals, from William Clark's letters after they returned, that will give the viewer ideas about who York the man was. So there'll be a little bit of a kind of a seek and find component where layers of York's personality and his contributions will be uncovered as the visitor views these text fragments that will be positioned in the environs of the York figure.
To me, an event like commemorating York with the statue at Lewis and Clark, that's just a part of regaining access to that story. So I was very happy to be a part of this process and very happy to see Lewis and Clark taking this on as a very serious project. And I think it's going to be the kind of event, the kind of coverage that will allow that foundation of history to be available to the next generation.